All right, let's get straight into it. If you're prepping for the bar exams, there are some rules you just have to know cold. And today, we're talking about one of the most powerful, most tactical weapons in your arsenal, UCPR Rule 222. Think of it as your secret weapon for getting crucial documents way before general disclosure even starts. It's a game changer if you know how to use it right.
So, imagine this. You're reading the other side's pleading, and bam, they mention a critical report or a specific letter that could blow the case wide open. You know you need that document, but you also know that the formal disclosure process is probably months away. So what do you do? How do you get your hands on it right now? Well, your answer, is UCPR Rule 222.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at why Rule 222 is such a powerful tool. Then, we'll dive deep into the word mention. Honestly, this is the part that trips everyone up. After that, we'll cover the exceptions, when the rule just won't work. We'll talk about privilege, which is absolutely crucial. Then the nuts and bolts of actually getting the document. And finally, we'll look at the court's backup power if Rule 222 isn't an option. Okay, let's kick things off with the fundamentals. I want you to see Rule 222 not just as some abstract rule you have to memorize for an exam, but as a real-world strategic tool. It's all about early, targeted intelligence gathering. Here it is, the text of UCPR Rule 222 itself. You really need to know this. It says a party can, just by sending a written notice, force another party to do two things with a document they've mentioned in their pleadings, particulars, or affidavits. They have to, 1, produce it for you to inspect, and 2, let you make copies. That's it. It's so simple, so direct, and you can see how powerful that is. And this is where you can really see the tactical genius of Rule 222. Just compare it to the standard duty of disclosure under Rule 211. See, general disclosure is broad. It's about all documents that are relevant, and it happens on a pretty rigid schedule. But Rule 222? It's like a sniper rifle. It's triggered by one specific event, the other side mentioning a document. And that means you can demand it right away, giving you a massive head start. And if you're wondering why the rule even exists, this quote from Justice Holmes in Century Drilling explains it perfectly. The whole idea is, look, if a party bothers to mention a document in a formal court document, it's fair to assume they think it's important to their case. So Rule 222 just says, okay, fair enough. If you've put that document into play, you have to let the other side see it. It's all about fairness. Okay, so since the entire rule hinges on a mention, you can probably guess what happens next. Everything comes down to what that word actually means. This is without a doubt the most fought-over part of Rule 222, and if you get this right, you're well on your way to mastering it. The key test, the one you need to remember, comes from the RP data case. The court said you need a direct allusion. An inferred or implied reference just isn't good enough. You can't just have a hunch that a document exists. The pleading has to point to it clearly and unambiguously. Let's make this really practical. Saying a letter from the plaintiff dated 1 January, that's a direct allusion. That works. But saying we received correspondence from the plaintiff, that's too vague. It fails the test. The examples from Balnaves and Amos are classic exam traps. Referring to the benefit of counsel's advice or a decision by resolution doesn't work because it's not a clear reference to a specific document. And let's drill down on this just a little more. The mention has to be of a document. You see, in Balnaves, the court pointed out that legal advice could have been given over the phone. Same thing with a resolution in the Amos case. It could have been made orally. And the key takeaway from the GSM operations case is this. It doesn't matter if you know there's a written report out there. If the affidavit itself doesn't explicitly refer to a document, then Rule 222 is not triggered. It all comes down to the exact words on the page. Okay, so we know how to use this powerful tool. Now we need to talk about its safety warnings, right? These are the key situations where you just can't use Rule 222. There are 3 big ones you have to memorize. Number 1, Rule 222 does not apply to a document that's mentioned inside an exhibit to an affidavit. Number 2, the other party has to actually have the document in their possession or control. And number 3, and this is so important we're giving it its own section next, it does not override legal professional privilege. Let me say that again, it does not override privilege. So, what's the deal with that exhibit exception? Well, Justice Holmes in Century Drilling explained it beautifully. The person swearing the affidavit, the deponent, is only swearing that the exhibit is what it says it is. They are not swearing to the truth or materiality of every single thing mentioned inside that exhibit. So that chain of reliance that underpins Rule 222, it's broken. And the possession requirement? Well, that's just common sense. As the court said in Harvey v. CSIRO, the rule can't force a party to produce something they just don't have. You can't use it to demand they produce a letter that they already sent to you, for example. The rule is about getting access to what they have, not about creating documents out of thin air. All right, let's talk about that third limitation, privilege. This is so critical for your exams and for practice that we have to be absolutely crystal clear on how Rule 222 and legal professional privilege interact. Okay, here's the absolute most important takeaway on this point. Rule 222 is a procedural tool. It's a mechanism for production. It is not some kind of magic key that unlocks privilege. If a document is privileged, it stays privileged, even if it gets mentioned in a pleading. They are totally separate issues. And this quote, cited in Balnaves v. Smith, really shows you the court's thinking on this. Legal professional privilege is a fundamental right. And the courts have basically said there is no way such a fundamental right can be waived by mere inference. That is, just by the simple act of mentioning a document. To overwrite privilege, you'd need a law that says so in plain, explicit language. And Rule 222 just doesn't do that. So bottom line, mentioning is not waiving. Okay, let's switch gears from theory to practice. You've spotted a direct allusion to a document, you've checked the limitations and they don't apply, there's no privilege claim, so you serve your notice under Rule 222. What are you actually entitled to? The case of John Kalanikos lays it all out for us very clearly. You have three main rights. First, they have to produce the document to you, not just say, oh, you can come to our office and look at it. Second, they have to permit you to make copies. And third, and this is a great practical point, you do not have to pay for their copying costs. The burden is all on them. All right, last section. What happens if Rule 222 doesn't work? Maybe the reference was too vague, or it was mentioned in a witness statement instead of a pleading. Are you out of luck? No. You have a backstop, the court's general power to give directions. So let's imagine that tricky scenario. A document is clearly mentioned, but it's in a witness statement. Now, we know a witness statement isn't a pleading, particular, or affidavit, so Rule 222 doesn't apply. Are you stuck? Do you have to wait for trial?
No way. This is where you pivot to your backup plan. UCPR Rule 367. Rule 367 is the court's big, broad, overarching power to manage cases and give directions. And as we see in cases like Gill v. Fairfax Media, a judge can use that power to order production of a document if it's in the interest of justice, even if Rule 222 wasn't triggered. It's your ultimate safety net. And there you have it. That's UCPR Rule 222, from top to bottom. You know its power, you know what triggers it, you know its limits, and you know its backstop. You have all the knowledge you need to ace the exam question. But the bigger question, the one you'll face as a barrister, isn't just about reciting the rule. It's about developing the strategic judgment to know when to pull this weapon out of your toolkit to help win your case.